Ah, there you are. I'm sorry. Stephen Brown is not available today. Just the other day, he came up to me and he said, Professor Tarker in Danglebury, I'm terribly sorry, but I have to do some stuff, and I go over there and other things. So, for some reason, he was not here, and he asked me whether I could take over just for 1 week his Inkcyclopedia entry. And I said, well, of course, yes. I will choose an ink that I really, really like, and that happens to be Private Reserve Avacado. Now, I'm not absolutely sure what an avocado is. I do know a type of fruit, I think, which is called avocado. This is called avocado with an A. Which is slightly surprising, but it doesn't really matter. All that matters is it's a green ink. Yes, basically a green ink, very dark, very well shaded, and it's just very, very nice. In fact, it is so nice that I like it to a nuclear degree. And I like it to such an extent that, in fact, I have purchased 70,000 bottles of the ink. Because I don't want to run out of this ink because it is so nice. And it's very, very well shaded, it's very dark, it's very intense color. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I just really, really like using it. So, what I'm going to do next is a writing sample. I will ink up some pens. Stephen Brown left me the pens he always uses. So I think that's going to be useful, and that's pretty much all there's to it. So I hope this is going to be useful, and we'll have some fun, I think. Bye. Yes, well, so here we go for the Dib Nib Dorks. No, wait, what's the Founder Pen Geeks? Sorry, the Founder Pen Geeks Inkcyclopedia entry for Private Reserve Avacado. Avacado. There you go. Let's start with a bit of fine writing. Yes, fine. Professor Tarquin Danglebury. For some reason I kind of enjoy writing my own name. Danglebury. I don't know why, but I do. Medium nib. Professor Tarquin Danglebury. I actually hold 7 honorary doctorates from different universities. Professor Tarquin Danglebury. In broad. So as you can see so far, this is a fairly light green ink in a fine nib. When it comes to a broad nib, the ink immediately gets much, much darker. Also, you can see already this is still wet, of course, so you can't really see that because that's what the thing does. It needs some drying up. But actually, with the M nib, you can already see, I think, that it's a fairly well shaded ink, and I absolutely love that. I love the shading aspects of this ink. Also, I seem to have misplaced the cap of my here it is. Sorry, the cap of my pen. Yes, well, there we go with some italic, an italic nib. Professor Tarquin. I'm sorry about the dog. The dog always goes off when these students come in to hand in their extremely poorly written papers, which I'll have to grade. Okay, Professor Tarquin Danglebury in an italic nib. As you can see again, the shading is quite nice. I really have to say I kind of enjoy it. Let us do some passes tests. 1, 2, 3. I'll come back to these later when they have dried up a bit. For now, let's do a little bit more writing, some more extensive writing. I'll start with a fine nib, which, incidentally, is also a flex nib. So this is going to be a flex. Honorary doctorate. Seven. Yes, you could in fact say that I'm an internationally recognized expert in the field of fountain penology. Of course, I was involved with the Fountain Pen Geeks Language Academy. Well, I'll gladly help out with this Inkcyclopedia stuff. I try to squeeze out a little bit of flex here. So far these three things don't seem to be completely dry yet, so I'll have to wait just a bit to see whether it dries, and then I can do the other thing with the stuff and actually hide the things. Okay, the broad. This Stephen Brown fellow actually was a student of mine at some point, which is where he picked up, he imitated my handwriting, which is, of course, a symbol of perfection. So should you wonder why exactly our writing looks the same, well, that's actually the explanation of the thing, and And then finally what we have left, of course, is an italic writing. How's this doing with the drying of the ink and the thing? Maybe it's a little bit wet. No, I'll have to return to that later, I'm sorry. Italic. Quite so. Of course, we have to do a bit of writing. Now, the funny thing is, in fact, although this is the first one I wrote, I think actually this one is not dry, whereas those two are. How's that even possible? Must be some bloody ballpoint user intervening with some black magic, is what they do. No, really, I've seen it. I can tell you stories that make your toes curl. Second pass and third passes here. Well, that is, of course, these are, of course, still the second passes, because the third pass is going to be done after a second pass has been done, but you understand what I mean. I'll come back to that one in a second. But for now, I think we should do a little bit of writing here. Avacado. There's an A of some kind. And then we'll do a little bit of writing. It's my autograph, you see. We wait until that dries up a bit, and then we put some water on, and we'll see how waterproof the ink in fact is. I think this is going to dry fairly quickly, or this will take a bit longer. So how's it? That's still a bit wet, I'm afraid. No, we'll just have to wait and see. But what we can already work on is the scorecard for the ink. Cleaning. Well, cleaning is good. Never had any problems with this ink. Bleed through. Well, just going to have to see, won't we? I cannot say a single thing about that right now. Colour. Well, obviously it's a dark green. I like it. Shading. Well, I would say shading is very good to excellent, really. I mean, this is a fantastic looking ink here. Flow. Excellent. Never had any problems whatsoever. Feathering. I have to check that out on some cheaper paper, because for now I have absolutely no ideas. And in fact, this seems to be dry now, so before I forget, let us add the final third pass. There we go. Very, very dark. Like the heart of a fountain pen, the heart of a ballpoint pen user. Of course, the fountain pen user's heart is so clean that it will go to heaven immediately. Feathering, we'll have to see about that. Drying time. Well, I would say longish, because it does take a bit of a while to dry. And then we have waterproofness. We should work on that straight away. So, first of all, let's just drip some water on there. More water, dripping. There we go. And now, of course, I'll need to dry off my fingers a bit. There we go. And I will take a paintbrush with some water and I'll put it on there and we see what happens. Meanwhile, in Gotham City, I shall talk you through these 3-pass tests. So what you see here, a single pass, is an ink that I think runs from a fairly interesting green to a much, much darker, almost blackish green. A second pass makes the ink immediately darker, makes it a very dark green, and 3 passes make it almost black. I think that's a very, very nice thing. I really like this gradual passing of the ink from a lighter colour to a very, very dark colour. So if you were to use a highly saturated fountain pen, such as the ones you find in places where you do and where you get the things and there you put it together, you would actually probably have a very, very dark ink. So, there you go. Now, let's have a look at these samples. So, the water. Well, the water has pretty much eliminated the ink, which is fairly obvious. Let me just grab a towel here, and I shall just try to get rid of the excess water in a carefully controlled and scientific fashion. There we go. Interestingly enough, the ink has now turned red. The water has made the ink change colour rather drastically, I would say. Let's do the same thing here. So this is not the towel actually making things red. I'm using a clean bit there. So interestingly enough, when you put some water to this ink, you actually end up with a green ink that turns reddish, or brownish, maybe. So, what do we make of that? Waterproofness, peculiar. Now we should do a writing sample on some cheaper paper. I shall remove the Rhodia from its pad, and I grab a sheet of cheap copier paper. There we go. So, let's start with a little bit of fine writing. 70,000 bottles of ink. Fine. Medium. $70,000 bottles of ink. Broad. And, of course, finally, italic. I think, I'm just adjusting the light there a little bit, I think we should have a look at some flex writing. So far the amount of feathering in this paper is very, very little, but with some flex. Tarquin. Dangleberry. Flex writing. Okay, So that's what we got, and I do appear to see a little bit of feathering right there. So there does this little bit of feathering, but of course this is with extreme amounts of ink, and not with the regular amounts of ink that people would normally use on paper, like this. "6mm nib. That's a lot of ink. TD for Tarquin Dangleberry. Again, this is a lot of ink, and actually feathering I think is quite controlled. Maybe in these bits where there's a lot of ink, you would see some feathering, but in fact I think it's not at all bad. It doesn't look bad at all. Now, bleed through. Well, there's definitely a lot of bleed through for the flex writing. For the regular writing, not so much, except for the broad and the... But even with the fine, when there's a lot of ink there, apparently you see some bleed through. So I would say bleed through is okay to good. It depends a little bit on how much pressure you exert and how wide and wet the nib is you actually use. So for this, I would say it's interesting to see that the flex writing gives much more bleed through than the regular calligraphy with the broad nib. On the Rhodia paper, bleed through is almost non-existent apart from the triple passes, but apart from that it's okay. So clearly this also depends on the paper you're using, but that goes for every ink. So let's finish up our scorecard. The bleed through is okay to good, I would say, depending on the paper, the nib, the wetness, etc. Feathering is good. Only with really, really wet patches of ink you will probably see some feathering. But again here, even with the italic or the broad writing samples, I don't really see a lot of shade, a lot of bleed through. So there we have it. What else did I have to cover? Waterproofness, peculiar, yes. And I think I've got everything else covered. So, there we go. I hope this was useful in some way. This was Professor Tarquin Dangleberry for Fountain Pen Geeks, covering Private Reserve Avacado, and I will probably see you later. Bye.